Hello, everyone. This is Conversations with Rob. Please like it's just. Hold on. Let me redo that again. Hello, everyone. This is Conversations with Rob. Please like and subscribe our YouTube channel. And obviously, if you know the YouTube channel, you've heard us show all over the Florida airways and also in a couple different states. And we'll get to that after where we are expanding. Today, I have a special guest who, as a person that's a progressive and's watched the Rising quite a few times with Crystal Ball and Sager. So I love that show, and I've seen Julia Manchester on there quite a few times, and she is a political reporter for The Hill. So, Julia, thanks so much for coming on the program. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
All right, so, Julia, as you know, I am a young broadcaster, so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got into broadcasting and reporting in the field.
Well, it's kind of something I've always wanted to do, but I really started out doing it in college a lot. I worked at my college television station and also interned in a number of local markets in Orlando, interned at WESH News, the NBC affiliate there, and then went to the ABC affiliate there as well. And then also interned in upstate New York, kind of around where I went to college. And then after that, I got my graduate degree at American University here in DC, got a job at CNN, working in their politics department, and then moved to The Hill and got involved with more TV there as well.
Right. Well, that's great. So can you tell viewers, and for the viewers that don't know, she's on the campaign trail right now, Julia is, and following the Bloomberg campaign. Can you tell the viewers a little bit of what a day looks like as far as being on that campaign trail?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends. It varies day to day. I'm actually in Washington at the moment, but, you know, I was in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, or last week, was it? It's hard to keep track now. And it's, you know, normally a very busy day. It starts out, driving or somehow getting to a particular campaign event and following the candidate that you're covering there. So when I was in New Hampshire, I primarily covered Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, and Pete Buttigieg. So followed them around for each time of the day, and normally I have to file stories throughout the day or at the end of the day. So it's a pretty busy endeavor. On Saturday, I was following around Mike Bloomberg in Richmond, drove out to Richmond on Saturday afternoon, and kind of just followed him around the city. His campaign guided us around and such, so that made things easier, but it's quite busy for sure.
Sounds like you're exhausted.
Yeah,
I know I would
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So lastly on this topic, what would you give as far as advice to young and coming reporters that are up and coming, whether in college or just out of college and just trying to move up the ladder?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just get involved with as much as you can when it comes to, journalism. If you're looking to get into journalism, and try to write as much as you can, get a byline out there, network obviously, and don't be afraid to try new things. I know that's very vague.
Right. Well, great advice. Thank you for that. So you've, as you said to the viewers, you've been in Florida and you work down here. We saw in 2018, Ron DeSantis won by about 30,000 some odd votes. Rick Scott won by 12,000 or so votes. It seems like Florida is really turning red. We have one Democrat, Nikki Fried, who's in the cabinet as the Secretary of Agriculture. But it seems like, is it Florida just turning red, or is it still a swing state? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's very similar to, I would say, Virginia, kind of the polar opposite in that it's more red and Virginia is more blue. I think Republicans have made many inroads in Florida over the past couple of years, and it is definitely moving in that direction. However, Democrats still very much have their eyes set on the state, definitely as a swing state. I mean, I was on a conference call with Michael Bloomberg's campaign earlier today, and they essentially have opened, several field offices in Florida, have hired over 135 staffers, looking to increase that number to around 200. So they're very much making the state in play. And you can also see in Virginia that Republicans are doing the same thing with President Trump when it comes to, this state, or Virginia, which was turned blue for the most part, in 2019. So, I would say it's definitely still a swing state, but it leans red for sure.
All right. Lastly, on Florida, because you're from here originally, what are the keys to winning in Florida? I mean, we know the I-4 corridor with the Orlando and Tampa area, Daytona Beach also in that, and of course, West Palm Beach with Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties are the big Democratic counties. But we saw in 2016 that Hillary Clinton struggled in a lot of Florida. I remember driving for job interviews all the way up I-4 and going up to Daytona Beach. I saw so many Trump signs. Even in West Palm Beach on the highway on 95, I saw big Trump signs. What do you think are the keys to winning Florida for the Democrats? Or do you feel right now that Trump's got Florida locked up? I mean, he's got his Mar-a-Lago and West Palm Beach. It seems like from the people that I speak to in Polk County, Orange County, there's a lot of Trump support here, and Orange County is even a Democratic county.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a native Floridian, I love to talk about this, but I would say, right now, like I said before, it leans red, and I think it helps that Ron DeSantis right now isn't necessarily unpopular in the state. He actually has a pretty good popularity or favorability rating right now among Floridians, and he's not, as blatantly. I think a lot of us looking at the campaign, that campaign when he went up against Andrew Gillum, expected him to be a bit more blatantly pro-Trump, but he actually appears to be somewhat more even-handed in his rhetoric and such. Still very conservative policies, but he's not as much of a vocally pro-Trump candidate, I think, as much as a lot of us were expecting him to be. However, at the same time, he is still a major Trump ally. So when President Trump comes to campaign in Florida, you can count on the fact that he will definitely use Ron DeSantis to really promote him and try to, get him familiarized with maybe some more moderate Republicans or even right-leaning independents who are turned off by Trump. I think Ron DeSantis could play a very key role in kind of affiliating Trump with those voters and making him a bit more favorable with those voters. At the same time, when looking at the different communities in Florida, I mean, I'm originally from Central Florida, the downtown Orlando area. I mean, that's an area that has definitely leaned more Democratic. I think obviously Hillary Clinton won downtown Orlando, but when you look at the surrounding areas, such as Volusia County, Daytona Beach, and New Smyrna Beach, Volusia County went for Barack Obama, I believe, in 2008 and 2012. And it flipped for Trump. And Trump was able to do that in counties across the country, but he was very much able to do that in Florida. He also has a lot of ties in South Florida, especially with Republican donors in South Florida and influential members of that community. So that's going to help him as well. The Cuban vote in Florida, the presence of Marco Rubio in particular, Cubans tend to vote, especially older Cubans tend to vote more conservative. That definitely helps Trump as well. And when he has two Republican senators campaigning for him and stumping for him in that state, that will help him too. However, going back to Orlando, when you look at the, Puerto Rico, there's obviously a big Puerto Rican population in Orlando. That segment of the vote the community, of the Latino community, tends to definitely lean more to the left. So I think you're going to see Democrats such as Michael Bloomberg, who's probably paid the most attention to Florida this primary, really look to activate that Puerto Rican vote in Orlando when it comes to Latino voters, as well as looking at younger Cubans or Venezuelans who have recently come and who are, seeking asylum here, might have family in Florida and such. So it's definitely going to be in play. However, I think Trump has an advantage because right now the Senate and the gubernatorial seat are all controlled by Republicans.
Can I just pick your ear a little bit more on Florida? Because you brought this up about the Puerto Rican vote. And, as I told you, I am in the Central Florida area. We saw the Puerto Rican vote, which was a big vote in 2018. Rick Scott did a great job organizing that Puerto Rican vote in 2018 for him, especially after the hurricane and when Trump was down there throwing the paper towels around. There was a lot of upset Puerto Ricans that I knew. But Rick Scott and I guess Ron DeSantis, in a way, they were able to distance themselves from Trump as far as the Puerto Rican fiasco. We've seen Andrew Gillum. I don't really think he ran a good campaign as far as the general election at all. He ran a great primary campaign, but not so much in the general election. Do you think Andrew Gillum lost that race as far as you spoke up with the Puerto Rican vote?
I can't speak to as much as how Andrew Gillum communicated and looked to target Puerto Ricans in that campaign. However, I can say that I think there was a lack of enthusiasm for Andrew Gillum in the general election. I mean, I talked to a number of Floridian Democrats who had supported other more moderate candidates in that primary. However, once Gillum was elected to be the nominee, I think that turned a lot of voters off. Remember, I think a lot of Democrats in Florida, they don't necessarily lean as far to the left and maybe other more progressive states like certain parts of New York or California or Washington State. There's a bit more conservatism in Florida. So I think that's what really hurt Gillum. And I think the fact that the economy had been on the uptick, at least at the macroeconomic level, helped Trump big time in the state. And that, Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis were really able to run on that.
Okay. I want to talk now about what's going on right now in 2020 to end the interview with a lot of these questions. What's your opinion about the results in Iowa? We saw Bernie Sanders won Iowa by 6,000 votes, and he won New Hampshire by about 3,000 or 4,000 votes. You covered those races. What was your opinion as far as the results go with that?
It clearly shows that it's a very close race in those two states between, I would say, moderate candidates and progressive candidates as well. I mean, obviously, Bernie Sanders had a home field advantage in New Hampshire, being a New England senator, and I actually thought it was a huge loss for Elizabeth Warren because she's also a New England senator and performed very poorly. However, I think if the moderate candidates were more consolidated, they easily would have trounced Sanders. If Klobuchar and Buttigieg were the same candidate, they would have garnered more votes and more support than Sanders did. In terms of Iowa, I mean, Sanders did win the popular vote. However, the delegate count ever so slightly went to Pete Buttigieg. So I think it shows in those two states, particularly the tension between progressives and moderate centrists in the race. But going forward, I mean, I don't think Iowa and New Hampshire are necessarily the biggest indicators for how the Democratic Party is going to vote going forward. The party has diversified so much in recent years. And I think contests like Nevada, South Carolina, Florida, Ohio, those are much better bellwethers for figuring out who's an electable candidate and really who will win the nomination.
So to go on that topic about Iowa, we saw the debacle there with the app. I've talked to a couple of Sanders campaign leads in Nevada. They're already worried about the app, the iPad app, and the Google Form app that they're using as far as the Nevada caucus goes. And it's going to create a lot of confusion as far as that goes. And nobody's really used that app before. They haven't had any kind of trial runs with this app. Have you heard a lot about this, or that people are worried that it could be another Iowa in Nevada?
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that it's a caucus makes it even more concerning because we know that caucuses are much more complicated than primaries. There's lots of concern about that. And I think this all happens when the issue of election security, hacking is such a huge priority and such a huge issue facing elections in our country. So the fact that this is a concern after one caucus that really botched those results is a major problem for the Democratic Party of Nevada and also the Democratic National Committee in general. Tom Perez is facing a lot of tough questions about how this was handled. So I can bet that the caucuses in Nevada, those officials running it, are under quite a bit of pressure.
Right. So we talked about you covering Bloomberg the past couple days. We saw the NPR poll, PBS poll too, come out where Bernie Sanders at 31 and Mike Bloomberg taking second place at 19%, beating Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren out for that second place finish. What do you think about this new poll? I mean, it seems like Mike's spending so much money on the airwaves, or almost over 380 million so far as TV ads, and he's really moving up the ladder because of these commercials and the electability argument, but also Sanders is gaining ground too.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a continuation of Sanders' momentum coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire. Hampshire for sure. And I think a lot more voters are viewing him as more of an electable candidate, despite the fact he's gotten a lot of backlash from moderates for being almost too progressive. However, Mike Bloomberg is really deploying all of these ads across the nation and billing himself as the most electable candidate to defeat Donald Trump. He's also billing himself as someone who's very close to Barack Obama. He's a very popular figure within the Democratic Party. There's one ad out right now, and I believe it's showing on Florida's airwaves as well. But if you were to watch it, you would think that Barack Obama had already endorsed Mike Bloomberg. However, he didn't. It was just a speech that was pulled from a number of years ago about that Barack Obama made about Mike Bloomberg. So, it's hard to say exactly what voters are clearly thinking with Mike Bloomberg. A lot of it could be name recognition. A lot of it could be the fact that they see him as the most electable. However, when I was following him around in Richmond, I will tell you that I walked into one of his campaign events, and there were over 900 people there. It was a very diverse crowd, and the majority of people I talked to said they were supporting him because they believed he was the most electable candidate who would defeat Donald Trump out of the entire field.
Well, let me ask you this: being at those rallies, we've seen Sanders rallies on TV, even Elizabeth Warren rallies too. The enthusiasm, people are pumped up; they want to be there. The crowd sizes at Sanders rallies, they had one in New Hampshire, over 7,000 people, and most of his rallies are real big crowds. Are you seeing that you brought up the electability argument, but are you seeing that as far as the enthusiasm for voting for Mike Bloomberg? Or is it just basically they're there because they believe, as you said, that he's the most electable candidate?
Well, I think there definitely is enthusiasm, and I think voters are enthused by the fact that they see him as the most electable candidate. I think they see him. Remember, Mike Bloomberg has very much been a part of the Democratic activist class, whether it's for combating climate change or gun control reform. He is very much a part of that class, and I think that gives a lot of hope to some voters that believe in those causes. So, I don't think it's necessarily the same kind of rock star reception that Bernie Sanders has gotten at a lot of these rallies. I think Bernie Sanders draws a younger crowd, and he's going into more, I would say, liberal places where, I think you're going to see a lot more young liberal progressives really gather around to see him. Mike Bloomberg is choosing smaller venues. I was at a craft brewery when I saw him last time. Bernie Sanders is holding these mega rallies similar to Donald Trump in a way. So it's kind of hard to judge them, but we'll have to see. That whole dynamic could change as we go farther in the campaign.
All right. Two more questions, Julia. Just basically, as far as the crowd sizes go, I just want to, say this. We were told by the media that crowd sizes didn't matter in 2016, that all these big crowds at the Trump events and the smaller crowds at the Hillary events didn't mean anything. She was more of a candidate that, we saw Hillary. She was competent, Secretary of State, First Lady. And then the crowd sizes, I feel like mattered, because we saw all these people at the Trump rally, rather. But I do want to get into the Nevada debate. We've heard a lot, and you've covered Mike Bloomberg as far as with the sexual assault issues that are coming out right now. We've heard it on The Rising Show and a couple of independent media newscasts. We also have heard a lot of this stop and frisk stuff, which is coming out more at the Sanders rally. Bill de Blasio brought this up as a main talking point for him as the mayor of New York right now. Do you feel like with the debate coming up tomorrow night at 9:00 that Bernie Sanders is going to hit this out of the park now, especially, and other candidates, even such as Joe Biden, that need a boost in the polls, are going to hit these issues as far as the sexual assault and stop and frisk?
Without a doubt, Michael Bloomberg is walking into this debate with a huge target on his back. And we've seen him and Bernie Sanders really go head to head with this war of words this week. And I think that's going to definitely spill over onto the debate stage. Bernie Sanders accusing him of essentially buying the race and being out of touch with the average American. Mike Bloomberg really hitting back at Bernie Sanders, saying he's not doing enough to combat the kind of negative rhetoric and behavior of a segment of Sanders supporters. So I would imagine that will spill out onto the debate stage. Joe Biden has also telegraphed that he will go after Mike Bloomberg on issues like stop and frisk, and I would imagine on the issues of the sexual assault remarks or sexism remarks. So that's going to be an issue as well. Amy Klobuchar, who's also a very good debater, raised $1 million in just a couple of hours after the last debate in New Hampshire. She's more than likely going to go after Mike Bloomberg, and she's telegraphed that she will go after him as well on those issues. So it'll be interesting to see how she really plays that out and attacks him.
Last question, Julie, and thanks so much for spending time with us. What do you feel like Bernie Sanders' biggest obstacle to the nomination is?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough question. I think right now his biggest obstacle is wooing moderate Democrats and establishment Democrats. I think there is a worry among not only moderate elected officials in the Democratic Party, but also among moderate voters that Bernie Sanders does not reflect their beliefs, whether it's chiefly, we've seen this concern around the issue of Medicare for all, but also there's a concern about whether he will actually be able to go head to head with Donald Trump, and I think that really extends to the down ballot race as well. There are a number of Democratic lawmakers who are facing very uphill re-election battles. Joe Cunningham in South Carolina is one of them. And he essentially went after Bernie Sanders last week and said, look, voters of South Carolina aren't going to support someone who is a democratic socialist. So I think there's a concern that these down ballot Democrats who maybe have more moderate constituencies could suffer from Bernie Sanders. So I think electability and appealing to moderates and more centrist Democrats is going to be a bit of a challenge for the Sanders campaign.
Thank you for that, Julia. And thanks so much for spreading all this knowledge. We really appreciate having you on. Julia Manchester from The Hill. Julia, before you go, can you tell the viewers where you're off to next and where can viewers find more reporting from you?
Yeah, so in terms of where I'm off to next, I think I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Virginia. You're seeing some of the candidates start to come through the state right now. I have colleagues in Nevada and South Carolina. I was kind of on the New Hampshire beat, so we're rotating it. And everyone can read my work on thehill.com and follow me on social media at Julia Manch, JuliaManch.
All right, Julia, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate this.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a good rest of your day.